the long-lost real daughter of the Sterling dynasty. The first thing I was told to do after being welcomed back into the lap of luxury was to stand in for Serena and take care of her blind fiancé. For 2 years I lived under her name, staying by the side of the Hawthorne Crown Prince. When I learned his sight was about to return, I calmly handed the role back and gave up the identity of fiancé. On the very day the Crown Prince regained his vision, I left Eastbrook for good. Before we go on, please subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. 1. The moment I stepped through the door I was pulled into a familiar embrace. Hudson folded me in his arms, nuzzling the curve of my neck. Where have you been? Why so long? Every time I came home he liked to rub against me like this, a giant dog waiting for his owner. And I would always hug him back just as hard, chattering about every little thing I'd seen. But tonight I only stayed silent. He straightened, eyes lowered. What's wrong? Hudson's eyes were beautiful, long, thick lashes, pupils the color of light honey, but they were unfocused, strangely blank. He couldn't see. So for 2 whole years he'd believed the woman beside him was the fiancée he'd been promised to since childhood, Serena. But I wasn't Serena. A few days ago Hudson had told me, almost breathless with joy, that the Hawthorns had reached a team of overseas specialists who thought they could restore his sight. Before I could let that happiness settle, I was summoned back to the Sterling estate. They showed me the medical forecast. The chance he would see again was almost certain. Serena and I had to swap places, immediately. When I said nothing, Serena smiled. Don't tell me you don't want to switch back, Vivian? Remember, you're only my stand-in. As if I could forget. 2 years ago, fresh out of college, I'd accidentally discovered I was the Sterling family's missing daughter. By the time they brought me home, my birth mother was dead, my father had remarried, and there was a new daughter in the house. They hadn't tracked me down for love or blood. They wanted a body double who could take Serena's place beside a blind heir. The price tag, $100 million. 2 years later, it was finally time to collect the final payout. I've always loved money, yet I couldn't manage even the ghost of a smile. Once you switch back, take the check and leave Eastbrook. Don't ever come back. The silence stretched so long that Hudson sensed something was off. He lifted me into his arms. In a bad mood? Then let me cheer my baby up. He carried me with practiced ease to the sofa, then felt across the coffee table for a folder. Didn't you say you wanted to see the northern lights? I had someone draw up a few travel routes, see which one you like. My gaze dropped to the cover of the file. Hudson, Serena. The 2 names sat side by side, nothing to do with me. A wave of sudden, crushing bitterness rose in my chest. 2. There was still some time before Hudson's surgery, but pre-ops filled the calendar. He refused to stay in the hospital, so I ferried him back and forth. To make sure Serena could step smoothly into my shoes, the Sterlings sent her along every time, observe and learn. After all, since Hudson lost his sight she hadn't visited once, she had no idea how he lived in the dark. I took a file from my bag, 2 years of notes on how we spent our days, every habit, every quirk. Serena flipped through it idly, so detailed. You really threw yourself into the assignment. I lowered my eyes and said nothing. When Hudson first went blind he'd sunk into a depression so deep he'd hidden sleeping pills, planning to end it. I'd learned to read the warning signs in every breath he took. To haul him back to life I'd tried everything. I walked every corridor with my eyes shut, memorized the layout, cleared every possible obstacle. On rainy days I wheeled him onto the veranda and guided his fingers to the cold raindrops. Every single day I painted pictures with words. Hud, there are 1,000 ways to feel the world, you don't need eyes for all of them. Looking back, I suppose you could call that throwing myself in, baby, ready to go home? While I was lost in thought Hudson had finished his tests and was standing in the doorway. I'd chosen a soft beige sweater for him this morning. It made him look gentle, moonlit. I started to stand, but Serena caught my wrist, brows arched. I've watched for days, how about I try today? I froze, then sat back down. A silent yes. This day had to come sometime. Watching Serena walk toward him, hips swaying, I felt a strange hollowness. Blood really is uncanny. Serena and I had never met until 2 years ago, yet we share the same profile, the same pitch in our voices. Even friends sometimes mistake one of us for the other in bad light. To a blind man the difference would be impossible. 3. Serena reached out, but before her fingers brushed him Hudson recoiled 2 steps. The temperature around him seemed to plummet. Get away from me, don't touch me. Who are you? Where's my fiancé? Both Serena and I froze. We exchanged a glance. I hurried to speak. It's the new private, my foot's asleep. At the sound of my voice the tension drained from Hudson's face. I crossed the room and slipped my hand into his. He crushed my fingers instantly. His brows drew together, sightless eyes fixed on Serena's direction, voice like flint. No perfume during work hours, my fiancé has allergies. Since losing his sight, his other senses had sharpened to a razor's edge. I never wore perfume, so of course he noticed the difference. For a moment I thought he'd caught us. Serena and I exhaled at the same time. Back in the car, Hudson pulled me onto his lap and kissed me hard, a punishment more than a promise. His chest rose and fell against mine. Why did you hand me to someone else? He meant the moment I'd let Serena take his arm. In this, Hudson was ferocious. Blindness had stripped away every layer of safety. He clung to my existence like oxygen. There had been a period of migraines so bad the Hawthorns hired a physical to ease them. One afternoon, while the physical watched him, I slipped out to run an errand. Halfway across town my phone rang. Hudson was in a rage, wouldn't let anyone near him. I raced back to find the living room wrecked, his left forearm bleeding in a steady drip the color of rust. The instant my fingertips touched his skin, the fury snapped off like a switch. He yanked me against him so hard my bones ached. His voice cracked, raw and shaking. Where did you go? Tell them to get out. I only want you. The weight of his head on my shoulder brought me back. Hudson held me, voice barely a murmur. Anyone besides you disgusts me. Outside, the roar of traffic fell away until there was only the warmth of his breath brushing my throat. Once, those words would have lit me up inside. Now I only parted my lips, and no sound came out. Hudson lifted his hand, long fingers skating over my brow, the bridge of my nose, the curve of my lips. He always liked touching my face. Again and again. I can't wait to see you, he murmured. Then the arm locked around my waist tightened a fraction more. I looked down at his face, inches away. Those beautiful eyes were as empty as ever. They held no reflection of me. It'll be soon. The surgery will go perfectly, I said. Hudson chuckled softly. Will you wait outside the OR? I want you to be the first thing I see. My lashes fluttered. I fought to keep my voice light. Of course. I'll stay with you the whole time. He nuzzled into my neck, soft hair tickling my chin. Catching my hand, he laced our fingers without asking, baby, don't lie to me. 4. After that day at Eastbrook, Serena grew careful. She'd assumed Hudson couldn't see a thing and would be easy to fool. Instead, he'd almost caught her. She stopped pushing me to switch back and started asking real questions about his habits. I answered whenever I could squeeze in a message. She found it tedious and tried to meet in person several times. I refused. Lately, Hudson never let me out of his sight. Maybe because the operation was so close, he was restless. It felt like the first weeks after he'd lost his vision. Out of nowhere he'd ask, "You won't leave me, will you?" He couldn't see. Everything depended on me. So he feared I'd abandon him and needed reassurance over and over. Yet every time I gave the answer he wanted, the worry never left his face. That afternoon he was in the living room listening to the financial news while I tidied the bedroom, an excuse to pack. I'd barely pulled the carry-on from the closet when he appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? He couldn't see, but guilt still flared in me. I scrambled for an answer. You'll be in the hospital after surgery, so I'm setting aside some clothes for you. Anything special I should bring? The tension in the room melted. He reached for me. Nothing. I just need you there. I didn't reply, only gave a small sound of agreement. About those honeymoon routes, decided which one? I froze, gaze dropping. I'd never opened the file. I'd handed it to Serena that day at Eastbrook. Whoever traveled with him wouldn't be me, so reading it had seemed pointless. Before I could answer, he said, "Let's pick the one you liked. Start in Tromsø and chase the northern lights. Then we'll visit that Arctic island you kept talking about. Water like colored glass, lakeside cabin straight out of a storybook. We'll stay extra days." His voice was low, a faint dreamy smile on his lips. A month earlier I'd scrolled past a Norway Aurora post and gone back to it half a dozen times. Hudson had been half listening to the news when he suddenly turned. Want to go? Since losing his sight he hated to travel, and he couldn't stand being without me. Overseas trips weren't something I dared imagine. Yet he'd offered, then let's go. You described the colors of the northern lights to me. He'd been planning it even then. Still, in the end, it would never happen. During daylight he stuck to me like a shadow. At night he asked again and again, "Baby, will you abandon me?" If I stayed silent he pushed harder, shattering my sobs against the pillows. Why won't you answer? Are you planning to leave me? I bit my lip until it throbbed and forced the word out. No. Then do you love me? Yes. Each time, the reply curved his mouth in satisfaction. He bent to nuzzle my collarbone. If you lie, I'll find you, no matter how far. A sudden chill ran through me as I huddled against his chest. 5. The operation was scheduled for next week. For the final pre-op tests, Serena arrived with the chauffeur. Today she wore no perfume. Her clothes, her style, everything mirrored me down to the last detail. Clearly she'd studied hard. Hudson climbed into the car. She moved close, copying my tone. "Vivian, do you think he'll tell us apart today?" She reached for the rear door before I could. Suddenly Hudson spoke. "Baby, why aren't you coming? Let me check that cut on your finger. Is it better?" Serena glanced down and noticed the band-aid on my left index finger. I'd sliced it the night before while cutting fruit. Tiny, almost healed. Hudson had insisted on the band-aid and swapped it for a fresh one before we left. She studied her own flawless fingers, shot me 2 dagger glares, and stalked to the front passenger seat. A family member had to be present for the exam, so I stayed beside Hudson the whole time. Serena's resentful stare burned into my back, but she was powerless. At last she cornered me in the restroom. "You're not thinking of backing out, are you?" She watched me through the mirror, eyes unreadable. "Honestly, I admire you. 2 years pretending for a blind man, no small feat. But every show ends. Don't let yourself believe the script. Tell me, if he finds out you've been living a lie under my name, will he still hold you like that?" My fingers stilled. Hudson's temper was legendary, his heart ice cold. If he ever learned I'd deceived him for money, my ending would be ugly. "Relax. When the time's up, I'll disappear." Back home, Hudson disappeared into the study for a conference call. Among the Hawthorne cousins he was the sharpest, even blind he'd never been written off. That was why the Sterlings clung so desperately to the engagement contract. With surgery approaching, Hawthorne executives had started briefing him. While he was occupied, I could finish packing what little I still had. When I'd arrived 2 years ago, I'd carried one small carry-on. Now that I was leaving, the same bag would do. 2 years had blown past like wind, leaving nothing behind. Nothing except money, that is. $100 million for 24 months and a love that had never been real. A fair trade. 6. I zipped the carry-on and slid it into the corner. Hudson's meeting was still running. His calm, decisive voice drifted through the door. This was a Hudson I rarely saw. At first he hadn't accepted his blindness, rage, smashed dishes, the suite in ruins day after day. Back then I'd told myself I'd taken a high-paying private job, caring for a difficult boss. I'd cleaned in silence, no complaints. I thought that would be the shape of us. Until the night I crept out for water and heard muffled sobs from the master bedroom. I pushed the door open. The floor was still a mess, and Hudson was curled up on the bed. That was the first time I glimpsed his frailty. Stripped of that layer of wild frenzy, he looked like a wounded cub. Without thinking, I stepped closer. "Get out." His voice was low, hoarse at the edges. I obeyed and turned to leave, but the next second a hand caught my wrist. In the darkness the fingers on my wrist looked almost bloodless, and they trembled slightly. I paused, then lay down beside him. "It's pitch black and the lights are off. Right now I can't see either, but I'm right here." All night he kept my hand locked in his. After that, he could only fall asleep if I was next to him. Lost in thought, I didn't notice the door already stood open. Waiting for me? Hudson was framed in the doorway, the sunset spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a riot of color cascading behind him. Maybe the hues were too fierce, they stung until my eyes watered. I rose on my toes, hooked my arms around his neck, and poured every last feeling into a kiss. One last time, one final indulgence. 7. The surgery day dawned with a light drizzle. Before they wheeled him in, Hudson kept my hand clamped in his. "Wait right here." He stared at me with those sightless eyes until the operating room door swung shut. I stood a moment. Serena stepped up and slipped me a certified check, the line of zeros blinding. She looked elated. "The ticket's booked. Someone will meet you at Eastbrook. Remember, once you leave, don't ever come back." Charles, actually, wanted me to stay until the operation ended, to be sure Hudson truly regained his sight. But each day Serena watched Hudson lean on me, and she itched to shove me out the door. "Anything else you'd like to ask?" "After I walk away, there won't be answers." A flicker of unease crossed Serena's eyes, then vanished. She sounded utterly certain. "Don't think you're special. I'll take perfect care of him. Anything you can do, I can do. The Hawthorne bride can only be me." I had no appetite for that title. Money outranks love, that was the lesson 20-odd years had beaten into me. Still, I didn't mind pricking her pride a little. Today she wore the same hoodie and jeans combo as me. I raked her with a slow stare. "Tell me, which one of us is the other stand-in now?" Ignoring the way her face drained white, I turned and left. Outside the hospital, I didn't bother with an umbrella. Fine rain stippled my cheeks like mist. I hailed a cab back to the Hawthorne estate for my carry-on. Instead of following the Sterling script to Eastbrook, I bought a high-speed ticket to a tiny southern town. As the train pulled away, Eastbrook's skyline shrank, contracted, blurred into a dot, and disappeared. I knew it was finished. 8. Seabrook was a nothing little seaside place, the air thick and briny. I followed the address I'd scouted and rented a seaside condo. The landlady was a kindly auntie who, learning I planned to stay, cheerfully hauled my luggage upstairs. Here alone? Vacation or work? Vacation, I answered, terse. For a month I blacked out the world. I spent every morning trudging the shoreline without purpose. Every night I sat by the window listening to the waves. I'd swapped the SIM card, old number, old life, both dumped in the trash. But memories don't fit in bins. I dreamed of Hudson so often. In dreams his eyes were still blank, yet he always found me in the crowd. Empty gaze, stubborn voice. You promised you would never abandon me. I woke each time with the pillow wet and sat in bed for hours. That day in the hospital restroom, Serena sneered that I was a gifted actress. For a crown princess born with everything, it must be impossible to understand. For someone who's walked alone so long, being needed, being clung to tight, is its own blanket of warmth. My feelings for Hudson had always been real. I was too small when I went missing. My parents' faces smudged into fog. My first memories were of a trash-picking grandma who raised me in grime. No matter how hard I scrubbed my clothes, the kids wrinkled their noses and coined a nickname, Trash Girl. No one wanted my friendship. Later grandma fell ill, the medical bills impossible, she died quick. At 15 I juggled school and survival, collecting scraps, handing out flyers, washing plates, anything. Each night I dragged myself home to wind-slicing cracks in the walls and a future bleaker than the dark. So those 2 years I hoarded the heat of his arms each time I came back from an errand. On rainy evenings we watched horror flicks, and when I shrieked his warm palm would cover my eyes. New Year's Eve we set fireworks in the garden, then stacked a crooked snowman in the yard. He couldn't see, yet the lamps in that house were always lit. Thousands of tiny moments stacked into 2 massive years. A suspended heart finally landing with a soft thud. I had no idea how long forgetting would take. 9. In the end I caved. On a gloomy afternoon I unlocked my phone and searched Hudson's name. The top headline was business news from a week ago. Hudson regains sight, officially returns as Hawthorne Group CEO. Below it, a press conference photo. He wore a razor-cut black suit, posture decisive. The once hollow hazel eyes now glinted sharp and remote under the lights. A stranger, but he looked good. Better than I'd pictured. I snapped the screen shut and let the sea breeze salt my eyes. No gossip about a Hawthorne Sterling engagement. Rena must have slid into place without a ripple. He hadn't found me. I should rejoice, money in hand, no storms ahead. Yet the wind was strong. Tears slipped out before I knew. Another week holed up in the condo. Landlady knocked to say a beach bonfire was planned for tonight, urging me to join. Young folks shouldn't hide indoors. Go make friends, lots of cute boys tonight. I needed air too. When I arrived the sand was already dotted with people, flames leaping, laughter everywhere. I grabbed a craft brew and parked myself on a lonely patch of sand. The drifting tune was an old-school love song, so happy my shoulders loosened. I stood to wander, and glimpsed a silent silhouette a few yards away beside the rocks. Simple black shirt, black pants, spine straight, utterly disconnected from the carefree crowd. My heart slammed against my ribs, frantic to break free, and I spun around. How could Hudson be here? Alone, or with Serena? A coincidence? Or had he figured everything out? The questions swarmed me, but I slipped into the crowd without a flicker of expression. When I looked again, the spot was empty, as if the flash of familiarity had been a trick of the light. I stayed a few minutes longer. The silhouette never returned, yet I knew I hadn't imagined it. 1 second's hesitation was all I allowed before I headed straight home. Whatever was happening, I had to disappear, no risks. The moment I stepped into the tiny apartment, my heart finally slowed. I reached for the glass on the table, took a gulp, and froze. The water was warm. Someone had been inside. Before the thought finished, a burning chest pressed against my back. Baby, didn't I warn you? Cheat me and I'd chase you to the ends of the earth. 10. An icy bolt shot from my tailbone to every nerve. I stood paralyzed. A steely arm locked me against him. The scent that belonged only to Hudson wrapped around me. Or should I say, Vivian? He spoke my name as clearly as if he'd never been blind. A draft of briny night air slipped through the cracked window, kissing the sweat on my skin, turning it cold. I shivered hard. Hudson hesitated, then shut the window. He stepped in front of me, tipping my chin up. Those once hollow eyes blazed with single-minded possession, the pale irises mirroring me perfectly. Why'd you run? If he'd tracked me here, he already knew the whole Sterling deal. Struggle was pointless. I dropped my gaze, throat sand dry. Alex, it's time for me to go. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Alex? Vivian, was I your assignment? Your project? I stared at the floor, mute. He waited, then pushed. Cat, got your tongue now? The final payout's wired, so you won't even waste words on me? My heart cinched, aching in pinpoint bursts. The memory of the trust he'd given those 2 years made every excuse vile. I didn't know why he'd come or what he wanted. Emery. Hudson traced my brow, the bridge of my nose, the curve of my lips, just like before. I told you I'd know you anywhere. Why didn't you believe me? His voice was hushed, yet each syllable detonated inside me. He used to do that while I shaved him, insisting, I'll memorize your face. I thought he was picturing Serena's. I'd never believed touch alone could store a person. Tears burst free, sudden as a dam crumbling. He watched me inside. I'm the one you ditched like a finished job, and you're crying before I do? I couldn't explain why the tears kept coming. Eventually exhaustion took over and I slept. 11. Daylight flooded the room when I woke. Everything looked ordinary, the pillow beside mine untouched. If not for low voices drifting from the living room, I'd have sworn last night was a dream. I was still staring at the ceiling when Hudson walked in. His tone was unreadable. Pack up. We're leaving. Leaving? For where? Questions jammed my head, but I didn't dare ask or meet his eyes. Only a month had passed, yet sighted Hudson radiated regal distance, his pale gaze weighing on me like stones. A stranger. When I stayed frozen, he flipped back the quilt and closed a hand around my calf. What are you doing? I yelped. He grinned. It's broad daylight, what did you think I was doing? Images that should not flash in daylight flickered through my brain. Face burning, I looked away. He slid socks over my feet, head bent. I have a States trip. You're coming. My mind blanked. Was exile in America his revenge? Reading the panic, he answered coolly. Wherever I go, you go. Get used to it. 12. Hudson turned out to be swamped. For 3 days in the States he worked non-stop, reappearing only at night. A guide shepherded me through tourist spots while he stayed at the office. Sometimes I woke after midnight and saw light still seeping under the study door. His eyes worried me. I brewed an eye care tea the internet recommended and waited until he dragged in near dawn. He shrugged off his jacket, the tension in his face softening. Still up? Waiting for me? I stood, cup in hand. Drink this before bed, it's good for your eyes. A single floor lamp glowed dimly, veiling his irises in mist. He glanced from the thermos to me, then closed the distance and folded me against him, arms cinching tighter. As ever, he nestled into the hollow of my shoulder and rubbed gently. Baby, I missed you. A sting of tears shocked my nose. At last the man in my arms aligned with the one I remembered. I hugged him back, feeling the steady drum of his heart through his shirt. Will you throw me away again? I shook my head wildly. Never. 13. Back in Eastbrook, Charles summoned me to the Sterling mansion. I expected a demand for repayment. Instead he slid a share transfer document across the table. 15% of Sterling holdings, half for Rena, half for you. I stared, blindsided. DNA said we were father and daughter, but any scrap of feeling had died 2 years ago. We were a deal that had closed, nothing more. Serena hovered nearby, clicking her tongue. Hudson didn't mention it? You can disown the Sterlings, but this equity is compensation. Worth far more than that 100 million payout, only an idiot would refuse. Charles's face stayed stony, silent. I understood, Hudson had squeezed them. I signed. Why look a gift fortune in the mouth? Serena walked me out. Back in her signature scarlet dress, she was every inch the glittering socialite. You win. Snag Hudson and everyone bows to you, even the Sterlings dance to your tune. She shot me a sideways glare. But I'd never play nursemaid to a blind man, so congrats, the job's yours for life. She spun away on her heel. That night I dozed off on the sofa and woke to Hudson nuzzling my neck. Hudson, are you a puppy? I mumbled, swatting lazily. He chuckled against my ear. How else could I always sniff you out? The mention woke me completely. I pressed down his restless hand and looked up into the laughing depths of his eyes. When did you know? He caught my hand, pressed a kiss to my knuckles. Very early. Only then did I realize that in those 2 years he had never once spoken my name. At the beginning he'd had no name for me at all, every day it was just get out. Later, it was always baby. All along, the one he'd chosen was me. While I was still dazed, he'd already lifted me into the bathroom. I clung to the doorframe. I already showered. One by one he pried my fingers free, voice a devil's whisper. Shower again. 14. Hudson and I got our marriage license. The honeymoon was set for Northern Europe. We spent 2 weeks in Norway, chasing the northern lights all the way north. When we finally reached that Arctic island, we ran straight into a whiteout blizzard. Trapped in the lakeside cabin for 3 days, we were cut off from the world, as if we'd slipped back to the days when he'd first lost his sight. No one disturbed us, only the glow of the stone fireplace and the sound of the sea. We built a snowman together, curled up on the couch to watch movies, held each other, kissed. Every time I lifted my eyes, Hudson's gaze was locked on me. Those light brown irises were no longer hollow, no longer empty. They looked like glass rinsed by rain, clear, bright, like dawn mist rolling in, soft, lingering. Every second, my silhouette was etched perfectly inside them. Night fell, the first star appeared on the horizon. This time, we finally saw each other in the same light. The end. Heroes Extra. Hudson had known for a long time that the woman caring for him wasn't Serena. By then he'd begun to accept the reality of blindness, yet for someone who once had light, learning to live in darkness was slow agony. He wanted to walk like a normal man, but he refused a cane or anyone's arm. Unable to see, the smallest obstacle sent him sprawling in humiliation. His knees were forever layered with new scrapes over old, they never really healed. Every night Vivian would slip in after he'd fallen asleep and quietly apply ointment. She thought his eyes were closed, that he was asleep. Then she'd sigh and mutter, "This must hurt like hell. What's so hard about letting someone help you? Just more work for me, you capitalist monster." Back then Hudson was too busy drowning in self-loathing to care. Later she somehow got hold of a custom wheelchair and wheeled him outside every day. When it was sunny she told him which flowers had bloomed, what color, what shape. In the rain she grabbed his hands to splash in puddles, soaking her sleeves. Watching horror flicks, she hid behind his back, thinking he wouldn't notice. She seemed to have endless energy. One noon, Hudson was dozing in the wheelchair when he heard her exclaim, "Damn, 20 grand for this rag? Why not rob a bank?" In that instant every discordant note in his mind clicked into place. She was definitely not Serena. Thanks to the engagement contract, Hudson had met Serena once, a pampered, Rowan girl who would never tend a cripple, let alone balk at a $20,000 blouse. Most likely the Sterlings had shoved some stand-in at him. In the past he would have exploded. Now he was a wreck, too tired to fight. When she got fed up, she'd leave on her own. But she never left, she only took better care of him. She seemed born knowing how to feel another's pain. After losing his sight, his other senses sharpened. He could tell what she was doing from the smallest sound. Bit by bit his attention shifted, his dead heart quietly reignited. She was right, there are many ways to feel the world, not only through eyes. Those 2 years in utter darkness, he had sensed her stubborn, shining soul. From then on, no night was ever long again. The day they removed the medical gauze, light first blurred into a haze, then sharpened. Antiseptic smell, white ceiling, shifting shadows outside the window, visual information flooded back. He squinted, overwhelmed. "Hud, how do you feel?" The voice beside him was soft, familiar. He opened his eyes and saw Serena standing there, gazing at him in concern. She wore light jeans and a sweatshirt, hair in a loose ponytail, imitating Vivian's style. When she reached to help him, just like in the hospital corridor before, he snapped, "Get lost." Serena froze, thinking he was still disoriented, and asked gently, "What's wrong? Are you hurting?" Hudson's pale eyes fixed on her, ice cold. "You're not her." Serena froze, struggling. "I am your fiancé." He didn't bother answering, a glance brought bodyguard to escort her out. Hudson stared out the window. She was gone. Probably from the moment the Hawthorne medical team arrived, Vivian had been planning her exit. He'd felt uneasy for days, sensing something about to slip away, helpless to stop it. Again and again he'd asked her to confirm she was still there. Sometimes he wanted to confront her, but he wasn't sure. Did she have some hold over the Sterlings? Had they struck some deal? If he tore away the last veil, would she vanish that instant? What would the Sterlings do to her? Where would he even begin to look? For the first time in his life Hudson felt powerless, blind, grasping at air. The week after regaining sight his condition swung wildly, a second surgery followed. He kept wondering, if the outcome was blindness after all, would she come back? Without realizing it, she had become as vital to him as light itself. Luckily the operation succeeded, day by day he improved. Charles slithered in to discuss the engagement contract. Hudson pressed his temples and hurled the file at him. President Sterling, quite the abacus you've got. Did you ever, for 1 second, treat her as your daughter? The dossier contained everything he'd had investigated about Vivian. Her road here had been brutal. Found by her family only to be forced into tending a blind man, playing stand-in, giving her whole heart so others could snatch the reward. The first thing Hudson did after resuming control was tear up the contract with the Sterlings. Then he started squeezing them, openly, until Charles guaranteed, whatever Serena ever received, Vivian would receive an equal share. He knew Vivian no longer cared for that so-called family, but the material things, the Sterlings would pay. When it was done, he flew south to the coastal city. He still nursed a little anger. He meant to scare her. But one look at her tears and every shred of rage evaporated. Hudson sighed inwardly. Forget it, she's home. Extra end. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and share with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. See you next time.